I'm Asian American, and this will be controversial, but I hope you'll hear me out to the end. I attended Harvard twice, for undergrad and for business school, and I fully support affirmative action and
Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. So guys, we are still at it guys. The Supreme Court ruling concerning the affirmative action guys. We have some Asian American people who think that damn, like this is the worst decision the Supreme Court could have ever made. And at the same time, we have another group of Asians celebrating this. Guys, if you ask me, I'm beginning to think this will backfire one day on the Asians. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. But otherwise, let me just roll the videos that I collected for you guys and then we will talk.
need to address this false narrative that Asians don't want affirmative action. I resent my race being hijacked to make a case for ending diversity. The Asian American admissions experience has been a primary focus of the current Supreme Court lawsuit, which I really resent because it's been orchestrated by Edward Bloom, a white man who has a track record of wanting to end diversity and inclusion in other areas of American life as well. You know, he initially took a white plaintiff before to the Supreme Court against the University of Texas and failed. And so he decided he needed Asian plaintiffs, and so he advertised for them. And now Asian Americans are being used as a wedge against other communities of color. The Harvard Asian American Association and the Asian Alumni Association are both pro-affirmative action. Harvard cannot create a campus that is diverse enough to fulfill its educational mission without considering race as just one factor among many factors. I mean, we've seen massive declines in minority admissions at universities when affirmative action is eliminated. And higher education and these institutions are pipelines to leadership in our society, a society that's still, unfortunately, far from equal and just, one that still has a lot of work to do to close racial disparities and combat systemic racism, one that all of that became painfully clear for this nation with the Black Lives Matter movement. There are racial disparities in education going back centuries in this country, and today, if you're Black, you are more likely to be in an under-resourced school, but also more likely to be viewed as having less academic potential. I mean, yes, in an ideal world, race wouldn't be considered in admissions because in that ideal world, everyone would have access to the same kinds of resources and there'd be no systemic racism. But that is unfortunately not the world yet that we live in today. So what can we do now? I mean, it unfortunately does seem inevitable that affirmative action will be struck down this year. So what's the point of all of this? For one, I think it's important for Asian Americans to speak out versus just simply being used as a pawn in a political battle. I'm also surprised that more people generally aren't speaking out, again, given higher education's then trickle-on impact on future employment opportunities, income potential, leadership roles. This also shows how much voting matters. Please vote in the midterms next week. Early voting has started. Lawmakers have the power to reverse things like the impact of the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action or Roe v. Wade.
The irony is, there are so many things that I would remain ignorant to and therefore not talk about if it wasn't for stupid comments like this that cause me to constantly check and recheck the information that I base my opinions on. With respect to affirmative action and Harvard, during their last admission cycle, Harvard had 2,000 available seats, keeping in mind that nearly 40% of their seats go to legacy admissions. So Harvard had 1,200 seats available to applicants. Among their applicants, 8,000 had a perfect GPA, 3,400 had a perfect SAT math score, and 2,700 had a perfect SAT verbal score. So even if Harvard prioritized GPA and test scores only, they would still be rejecting a majority of their applicants who have perfect GPA and test scores. Now, Harvard employs a holistic approach to a race plus system, which means that if Harvard is going to take into consideration the race of an applicant, they only do so if it enhances the applicant's chances of getting in. They do not do it in a way that harms an applicant's chances. So that means that even the Asian American applicants who were rated low in the holistic approach on factors such as likability, kindness, and courage, it just means that ultimately Harvard did not take their race into consideration and treated them the same as white applicants. Because Harvard only takes race into consideration when it helps, they do not penalize anybody on the basis of race. Now, Georgetown did a study which did show if there was no affirmative action and colleges only prioritized test scores, that Asian American enrollment in colleges would increase slightly. However, the 21% of Asian Americans who are currently admitted through the holistic approach to affirmative action would lose their seats, and those tend to be Asian American applicants who come from lower income families. So when Asian Americans oppose affirmative action, what they are advocating for is for more privileged Asian Americans to replace less privileged Asian Americans in college.
Okay, so just to add on that, guys, removing racial consideration doesn't level the playing field. You agree with me, right? Check this. The reality is that elite colleges are more than happy to admit non-competitive students. Check this other research, guys. Like 17% of Harvard students are white legacies. You know what I mean? Children, alumni given preferential treatment. That's almost as much as the Hispanic and Black populations combined, guys. So let's just watch the rest of the video and let me know what you think about this in the comment section below.
Every year or so we get headlines like this. I'm going to talk about 3 things that are actually the problem because it's not affirmative action. First is sensationalist media and clickbait titles, and how the media and conservative right weaponize affirmative action to place Asians as a wedge against Black and brown communities by playing up the model minority myth. And additionally, this contributes to anti-Asian racism because of how it portrays Asians as a monolith. The second issue is testing with application standardization. Standardized testing as we know it today was shaped by eugenics. It is proven to be racist, classist, ableist, and to benefit cis-het white dominant culture on all fronts. Hence why so many colleges and universities are dropping standardized testings from their admission requirements. But many high schools and entry points into colleges and universities, as well as colleges and universities, still do use standardized testing. There are classes that people take that cost thousands to prep for these standardized tests. And the fact that these classes a lot of the times are teaching you the technique on how to win in the game of testing, as well as how to win in the probability of choosing the correct answer, tells you a lot of what you need to know about what standardized testing is about. The third issue is legacy preferential admission policies. A research study showed from 2014 to 2019, Harvard alum legacy students were accepted at a 33.6% rate versus 5.9% for non-legacy students. And when you consider who legacy is, who has historically gone to Harvard, who it was originally built for and by, it is systemically white, structurally white. Legacy policy guarantees white dominant culture in institutions. The problem isn't affirmative action. What the media often doesn't talk about is how affirmative action has helped hundreds of thousands of folks into spaces where traditionally and historically we have been kept out. And remember, the goal of our work isn't just eventually to get into colleges, right? That's not even for everyone. What we want is to take down the systems that uphold conditions that even make affirmative action necessary.
Frankly speaking, affirmative action has been a broken system, guys. It underserved Blacks and Native whites and Asians and giving the largest boost to the palm color women. That needed to change, guys. But now, instead of being able to improve the broken system, we just have no system at all. So let's see what happens next year when more Black people, more Hispanic people get enrolled in colleges next year. What's going to be the excuse? Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below, and let's watch the rest of this video.
This affirmative action case is going on in the Supreme Court today, and Asians are divided. And I'm like, bro, Asians, the problem is not affirmative action. The problem are legacies. Legacies are people who get into fancy colleges because their parents went there. These tend to be white people because most of these fancy colleges have mostly white people and have historically had even more white people. Thinking of this as an Asian who got into an elite Ivy League college, growing up, I always heard that it was so hard for Asians to get into school because they limit the number of Asians and we all had good grades. So we had to find some way to stand out, but it was usually due to luck that we got in at all. I had so many friends who had perfect grades, way more interesting extracurricular activities than most of the people I met in college, and they didn't get into any Ivy League school. When I got into Dartmouth, I felt so lucky because I went to one of those really average public schools where the teachers teach you enough to get 3s on AP tests and you have to learn the rest yourself if you want to get a 5. Knowing how unlikely it was for someone from my school and my background to get in, I was like, okay, I'm not going to get straight A's in college. I can just settle for B's because it's probably going to be really hard for me because everyone's going to be really smart, have come from these fancy private school educations who are way smarter than me. I show up to school and sure, there are a lot of smart people, a lot of smart Asian people, a lot of smart black and brown people, a few smart white people, smart poor kids, but a lot of white kids who are dumb as rocks. And they were just there to drink and party, did not show up for class. And I was so confused. I'm like, how did these mediocre people get here? They don't even show up to class. They obviously don't care about this wonderful opportunity at all to learn. I was like, fuck these kids. I'm going to get the best grades after all. And so I got really good grades. And these other kids, these legacies, got terrible GPAs and still ended up in the same companies that I and all my friends who actually worked hard ended up at. I'm like, how did this happen? And that made me realize these legacies didn't even need this education. They got these jobs despite low GPAs, despite never showing up to class, because of their connections, because they had family who vouched for them and gave them jobs. They could have gone to shitty schools and still had the same jobs and end up in the same place and make the same amount of money as us. So why are they here not appreciating their education? These limited college spots at elite institutions are opportunities for people to socially, economically advance, for breaking generational cycles of poverty, for helping new generations of youth become leaders of this world and spread knowledge, and to have more diverse leaders come into politics, come into top positions at companies because they had these fancy educations. These legacies didn't work at all. They were just born into this life, born into the path of private schools and Ivy League colleges, and then a fancy job at a bank that pays well, without even appreciating the opportunity for an education that they've had or the resources that they've had. So why are they here? I'm not saying that all legacies are like this. There are some legacies that are intellectually curious and like worked hard, but for the most part, like, why are we focusing on the black and brown people who got to get in? Why are we not focusing on legacies? Let's cancel legacies. What the fuck?
Let me just start off by saying that I'm not against affirmative action. I think that diversity is one of the most important things and absolutely necessary in all environments. And I do also think that Black and Indigenous people need a means of leveling the playing field after generational trauma. However, I do not think that the system of affirmative action is necessarily perfect. First off, I think it compares minorities and pits them against each other, and I don't necessarily think that's very productive. But also, I think it tends to treat race as a monolith and put one race into a box of, like, stereotypes. In the case of Asians, I think it definitely perpetuates the model minority myth, which is super harmful because we're not a monolith. There's a lot of different types of Asians, and people forget that. For example, laborers that came over during Gold Rush and Transcontinental Railroad, as well as refugees. We are not all those selected high-income Chinese people that immigrated over. I think affirmative action neglects to realize that a race is more than just one myth.
Okay, guys, so before we go, guys, I have this email that I have to read for you as part of this video from another Asian brother from another mother or another race, whatever you prefer. Okay, so, and it reads, Black activists are the reasons why Asians in America want so much racial progress in the last century, and Asians used to overwhelmingly show support back. It's really sad to see many Asians now believe in propaganda about crime, individualism, and become accomplices to anti-Blackness, and the affirmative action debate is just only one part of it. Anti-Blackness is so deep in the way some of our communities think about the world. So guys, that was an email from one of you guys, my subscribers, who sent me this email to read and put it as part of this video. So guys, let me know what you think about this entire video in the comment section below. Subscribe if you have not subscribed already, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.